All right. Welcome to another live recording of Command Control Power. And as a special feature for our patrons, we've been soliciting their feedback and live commentary. So if you are a patron, just look for that message on Patreon when we're recording, and you can join us for the live, engagement with us, live commentary. We feature some comments in the live show, and this broadcast will be public, so our regular listeners will be hearing this as well, and you'll be hearing about feedback we're getting from our patrons during the show. Welcome to Command Control Power. Nice to see you guys again.
I got to work on my appearance, Joe. Little nip and tuck here, a little more hair, maybe some extensions in the front. I don't know. Dreadlocks, I'm thinking maybe.
I love it. Yeah. All good ideas. Yeah. Just week by week, we're going to see this. You're going to see you cycle through that stuff. That's good.
Or maybe just the rainbow wig. I'm thinking I could just go with that and stay with it.
Right. Rainbow wig. Nice.
I just throw on a hat, Jerry. Right? I just don't bother. I just throw on a hat and I'm good.
I actually forgot I had to be ready for video today. So yeah, not exactly fully ready. So to kick us off here, we had a question from one of our patrons, and I think we'll just kick this around since this is really top of mind for a lot of people these days. Of course, the Vision Pro was just released last week. I mean, we're barely a week in, not even a week into the public release there. And our patron, Victor Orley, asked a question. Do you think Vision Pro will be a success or not? Great question. Personally, he thinks that it'll be the biggest flop since Lisa. I thought that was an interesting reference. I mean, you could go with Ping. You could go with, there aren't a lot of flops, right, from Apple. But can you guys think of any other big flops from Apple?
The stereo that Steve Jobs introduced.
The hi-fi, iPod
the hi-fi.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I have a client who had one of those. They had it for a long time after it was, no longer current, and they would bring it on site and it sounded good, but yeah, I mean, now we've got the HomePod. So, I don't know. What are you thinking? Yeah.
I think just getting back to that, I think Steve was quoted. He had a multi-component hi-fi system in his house, in that minimalistic, old-time mansion that was recently torn down a couple of years back. And he said that about the hi-fi, he goes, this is going to replace my entire stereo system. This box.
Really?
It was fabulous. Yeah. It's just, it's just mind-boggling.
He was great with stuff like that. I mean, he could, the reality distortion field. I mean, he could say something like that and you believed him. And it didn't matter if he believed it or not. He believed it. He believed what he said, basically,
That's
whether
right.
it made sense or not. But,
Ice to Eskimos.
What was that? Say it again.
He could sell ice to Eskimos.
Yes, exactly. Classic. Well, Sam, I see you're not wearing your Vision Pro. So do you have one on order? What's your take on that?
I've been seeing all this social media. I mean, they're all setups, but of people walking through New York City with their Vision Pros or sitting on the subway and doing stuff. I'm it's so ridiculous. But
yeah,
I don't think it'll be a flop. I mean, I know a number of people that have plunked down the money already. I was a little surprised, to be honest, but I don't think it's going to be a flop. I mean, in comparison to what the others that are out there, the Quest by Meta and all this other stuff, they're not, I mean, at least from my market audience that I've seen, they're not massive sellers, but they get out there. And that's probably, you're going to see a niche audience of people that can spend $3,500, which is a lot of coin. Right. I don't think it'll flop. I think it needs to be more price conscious if it's going to get a lot of adoption, though.
Yeah, I mean, don't you think that likely that they're signaling that almost by, calling it the Vision Pro, Apple Vision Pro, right, that implies there'll probably be an Apple Vision at some point, then maybe soon. I was of course tempted to try to some way to justify, and this is what stretch even for me, it's I need to know how the new technology works. I have these one or two clients who are I know they're going to ask me, and I'm my reason is it's too expensive. But there, I don't want to say that to a client. I can't afford it. It's too expensive to certain clients. So, and I also don't want to say well, I don't really care about it. I do care about it. It looks really interesting. I would love to have some personal experience with it. But one of my reasons for not justifying being there on day one was I bet they'll probably come out with a Vision regular, a Vision, amateur, a Vision non-pro, whatever that is, like in 6 months or something. Like I really wouldn't be surprised if it followed pretty
Yeah.
quickly thereafter. I could be totally wrong, but yeah, to your point, if it comes down in price to like $2,000, I mean, now you're in like iPhone price range territory,
Right.
It's not that crazy to think about that.
I think it's entirely possible. And I think you're probably on point. We will see, the lesser version of that. It's just obviously they want to sell these, so they'll move these for a bit as much as they can, and then we'll see the common folk version come out, the one that we're
Right.
going to buy probably.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to try the Pro. I mean, I think it looks really interesting, and like it sounds like the sound quality is going to be awesome. As a productivity device, it seems really interesting. Like of course, what everyone in our kind of world is talking about is like being able to just like look at the screen, through the Vision Pro and tap connect or pinch connect or whatever we're calling that gesture now, and then like just have a big screen, and then I could walk into the other room and just be doing work in that room, and I can,
Right.
and so on a plane, obviously, as everybody says, yeah, it seems interesting.
The one thing that I found kind of curious, I mean, it makes sense, but you know how like the Vision Pro is supposed to be specifically fit to you, and you need to have the right measurements and everything like that, and it can also go according to a prescription if you have eyeglasses or anything like that. I was reading something about in education where this could be an interesting tool for education for kids to use, but it's not meant to be a shared device.
Yeah,
because
right.
of the custom fit. So it's not like you can buy one for a classroom and have
Yeah.
kids test it out. So that's
Yeah.
kind of interesting there. It's not meant to be that sort of a solution. So it's not cost effective in education.
Right. Well, again, at least not in this version. Maybe
Right.
the
Yeah,
next
yeah.
one will be like, just take off the glasses, pop them on, and it,
It's got a rubber
I mean, the
band
thing
back.
is,
Yeah, all good.
yeah, and like, but optically, like, how would they do that? I don't know. I mean, like to your point about, the prescription part, of course, there's also like the fit. It's really important that it seals out the light, the light
Right.
seal. I don't want like somebody else's light seal on my face anyway. So like, I'm going to need a custom one of those in my prescription and whatever. So, yeah, it is a tricky product. It's like, I mean, it's basically the most personal product Apple has made, and we thought like AirPods were personal and the watch was personal, but this is a whole new level.
Well, dude, AirPods are personal. I'm not putting someone else's in my ears.
True.
That's
That's true.
gross.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, what about you, Jerry? Are you tempted? Like, would you say, what would your price point be that would get you?
Yeah, let me get a piece of this. So you're looking at a guy who has trouble spending $8 for an egg on a hard roll with cheese. I'm from the days where the egg on the hard roll should be about $3.95. I might pay $5, but if I
Right.
go into a sandwich shop and I'm hungry, I'm not going to pay $8.
You're going to walk out?
So we're looking at, I'm going to walk out, and we're looking at over $3K. That's
Yeah.
a tremendous amount of money. Amount of money. And we're talking about a product that's really not scratching an itch that needs to be scratched. I mean, people made some unfair comparisons like, oh, well, the first iPhone wasn't up to par. And I look at the first iPhone now and I think like, how could I ever use that? Well, it's not a fair analogy. The iPhone out of the box, you can make a phone call, right? And that was the number one thing that it was supposed to do.
Yeah.
So my feeling is this is all, it's a luxury device. It's a lean back device, right? As you pointed out, Joe, and Sam, it's possible for us to do productivity on it, bring it into an educational environment. But, we're looking at like 2028, 2029. We've got the roadmap on this. We've got a long way to go before it's even approachable for.
Yeah.
And the use, and people are saying, well, when WWDC comes out and they're going to have time to spend with this and do some coding, you're going to see a lot more development for this. And this is all true, but this is, I mean, is it going to flop like Lisa? No, I don't think so. I mean, I think there's going to be a market for it, but I applaud someone like our friend of the show, Lucas Acosta, was very excited on Patreon, not Patreon, but on
Slack.
Slack. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe. He pointed out that he was getting one and he got it and he's excited and he took a picture of the case and the case is really nifty for it. And these are all lovely things.
Yeah.
But you know, it's not for me.
Yeah, well, other people pointed out about that case. I mean, it looks awesome. The travel case, you know, it's like really well designed. But I thought it was interesting. Like it's huge. Like how are you? Like, you know, it's a beautiful case, very well designed. But like then you have to put that in a backpack, and that takes up the entire space of your backpack, only so you can like put these goggles on the plane and do like a couple hours of work before the battery dies. Maybe you've got a second one. I don't know. You know, and just. I don't know. I could just use my laptop, you know, like like it does seem like a luxury thing to have this like big, beautiful screen. I mean, you know, it is a pretty great luxury though. I mean, the idea of watching a movie in that space, it's very appealing to me. I see, here I am trying to justify it again.
Yeah,
but,
you're working.
Speaking of,
you need
you know,
one, Joe. You need one.
I do need one. Yeah. Well, so Adam Rice points out that Anil Dash has a good take on this. The future Vision Air, or whatever it's called, will ditch the external eye displays and complexity and mostly be a very large smart display. So that's again, that's the main thing we're focused on, is like this concept of just like a very large smart display. I mean, I like the concept of like being able to sort of like walk around and have, you know, as Apple is calling it, spatial computing. Like you can have a window here and have a window here and turn and look. And if they did away with that, you know, to simplify the interface, so it's like really just kind of one display or something, I maybe some of that appeal would go away. But I do think that you know, that's kind of a core function, is like just being able to like not have to have a physical screen to wear the screen on my face. Like that's a cool idea, you know, and I'm pretty impressed with Apple for actually solving that. And if they could do that for less money and like a lighter weight, more simplicity, which of course is the way that things will go inevitably. It's just a question of how much time we need. But yeah, I would find that pretty appealing to have that.
Sam, would you be comfortable podcasting video now that we've moved to video with Joe's avatar?
With Joe's avatar?
Yeah, just you and me in real life, and Joe's walking around with the headset, and we see
and I'm
rendering
on screen,
of Joe.
But it's my
as long as I don't have to look at
persona.
his fake eyes through the Vision Pro, then I can deal with the avatar.
That part to me was one of the most interesting aspects about it. It's like, you know, in the time of like post-COVID, like Zoom is like such a, you know, I mean, just Zoom is becoming, or has become, like a word for like making a call. You know, it's like everyone's just doing video, like face-to-face video, to engineer this entire device to go on your face so that you have you know, that you can see in this spatial reality world, spatial computing world. Like, and it actually ironically makes like the one feature that people want to use, like that, you know, like you're saying, Jerry, with the phone, like the one feature is it makes phone calls. Like this thing, actually the one thing it can't really do as well is make video calls. Like, so they had to engineer their whole concept of a persona and an avatar that they're like generating now, because like they want to show you without the thing on their face that you have to wear in order to be in this environment that they created. It's just such a weird situation to be in, you know. It's not the same with like wearing AirPods. It's not the same with anything else. Yeah. Very strange.
Do you think there will be some down the road, even a year from now, 6 months from now, some sort of a killer app, you know, where everybody's going to see this and then go, oh, now I need to get it? Because I have an idea.
Okay. Well, so my take on that, I want to hear, porn.
I want to hear controversial from Jerry for sure.
Maybe you're going to say porn, Jerry. I don't know, but but
that's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, that's expected, not controversial.
I know. That's it.
But wait. Now that
go ahead. What is it? Yeah, go.
Now that you let the cat out of the bag, because that drove the online video industry.
Good
just
point.
Put the VHS out of business, and all of a sudden, you know, we were looking at little QuickTime movies, and then the porn industry drove online video. So I'm wondering if that's going to drive the technology forward. That, you know, unmentionable thing.
I think it's entirely possible. All joking aside, you know. I was just thinking how funny it is. Like, I'm looking at my comments. I'm like, I hope people read the timestamps on my comments, because I said I'd pay for that upgrade in the comments. And I hope they don't align it with Jerry's comment about porn.
It's too funny. Good point about timing. Yeah. Well, I mean, to make an interesting point there, Jerry. That's like that is a driver. I mean, it's an industry whether people like it or not, and so clearly, like a fully immersive video device kind of would seem to like pair well with that. And it may drive the technology therefore around it. I was just going to say spatial computing is the killer app. The concept of like having screens around you and being able to look around and change your focus by turning your head, and now you're looking at this window, and then turn over here and you've got the window right where you left it. Some of the other demos, like having a kitchen timer like that's sitting on the rice as it's cooking, and it's like you can walk in the other room, and then to go check the timer, you walk into the kitchen and you look at the pot of rice that's cooking or whatever, and like there's the timer showing right above it. I mean, that's like one of the few kind of like augmented reality features, where it's like
Joanna Stern mentioned that. I don't know if you saw that, where she had two timers going, and she could place the timer over the object on the stove, which was kind of cool.
That's very cool.
For $3,000, I'm gonna buy it.
Yeah, no, all you have to do is walk around with this thing on your head, and then you have timers wherever you need them. Like it's not quite a killer app just for that one feature, but
we mentioned pornography as possibly driving it, or just entertainment. So Nana can go to Branson, Missouri, and she can see the Osmond show, with this thing on her head.
Interesting.
Or see Tool, Joe.
I was just thinking Joe would get it
for Inoculum
concert. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I would.
You wouldn't have to go, Joe. You could stay home.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. No, I mean, I would sign up for that. If I could like pay, $20 for a Tool concert, that's like has some level of like 3D and whatever
access.
Else. Yeah, exactly. So that would be pretty cool. I mean, again, these are all like ideas. At some point it adds up to like, maybe it's a compelling upgrade. I think the other thing that's compelling about it, again, as Adam Rice said in the chat, is that, and I think he's quoting Anil Dash again, is that the Vision Pro is kind of like in the range of like a high-end display, So if you're thinking about like, well, I have a laptop, I really wish I had a big screen. It's like, well, you could have a big screen and so much more, and if you're considering the price of, certainly it's quite a bit more than the Apple Studio display, but if you're looking at the XDR, like, okay, maybe I think that he did some math here as well. Okay, so Studio display plus XDR display divided by 2 is $32.99. I guess like that way you could have, multiple screens, maybe that's what makes it an apples to apples comparison. I don't know. That's the most compelling thing, is like, if you're considering dropping several thousand on a display, and this could take the place of a display. It's a lot to ask, though, to keep this big thing strapped on your head, though. Like, I think until I buy it and use it for hours at a time, I'm not sure I'm going to be like able to decide if that's really something I want to do,
Exactly.
Yeah.
All in due time. I think we're all on the same page when it comes to expecting the next iteration of this, and it being more applicable to, or just more in line with financial aspects of what we can afford and all that stuff. So yeah, it's interesting to have this early conversation, and I think we have these thoughts about it on the technology side as well as the financial side. But we all know we're going to get something in the near future that we'll be like, okay, I'll plunk down that $2,000 or $1,500 or whatever.
Right. Yeah, Guillaume exactly. has been contributing a lot here to the chat, as did Adam Rice. And the thing that both of you guys are kind of saying, though, is we're still speaking to an edge case. No one that I support has gone out and bought a $3,000 monitor. And I know there's people out there that do that, but that's not the middle of the road.
Yeah.
Right now, that's cool a great point. Yeah. I mean, so I think you're referring to the XDR, the Studio Display XDR, Jerry, right? And
well, Adam was, yes.
Yeah. And Sam, have either of you guys had a client buy one of those? I don't think I've had a single client buy one. Yeah.
Not one.
So that's a really good point, Jerry. And, even I have a photographer client who is highly dependent on his monitors, and he has 4 of them actually. So there's 2 on the desk and 2 mounted. I've mentioned this client before, 2 mounted on the wall. So he has like this, like command central of like these 4 screens. He does his editing and reviewing and stuff on the 2 that are in front of him. And for client reviews where he's showing the photos to the client who's going to be buying, prints and digital images and things like that, he's also using the ones on the wall. And even in his case, he bought the studio display because that, he just couldn't justify spending. What is it again? 6,000 or 7,000. I mean, if you need the stand, if you need the Visa mount, whatever, it just all adds up on that XDR. So, I mean, if he didn't buy even one of those, there's clearly not a huge market for that. So that's actually a great point. Guillaume also says that one day there'll be a Vision Pro. You can rent an airplane specifically for business class. I think that's a great concept, but again, the hard part is like, what's your prescription? How does your face fit? Now, Apple could partner with, an airline, like let's say United, and, you could, as you buy your plane ticket and, as a little add-on, they try to sell you an extra bag, or like access to the lounge or whatever it is after you check out. They could offer you to scan your face and have your Vision Pro all ready to go, ready and waiting with your prescription and your special light shield ready to go. So in theory, they could do it. And of course, it would be like sanitized and whatever ahead of time. So it's not a bad idea. If again, from the airline's perspective, they buy one for, a few grand, they buy a selection of all the things. They're obviously partnered with Apple. So Apple's maybe taking on some of that. And then, they just rent it out like twice a day for the next year. I think they could make some pretty good money doing that. And Apple, it's in their interest to do it as well, because they would introduce a lot of people to this concept. And people were going to say, I mean, first of all, if you're buying a first class airline ticket and you're renting the Vision Pro, you're probably going to go home and buy a Vision Pro at that point, and you probably have the money to do that. So it's a really interesting point from Guillaume in the chat.
And that's the upgrade I would pay for, just to be clear.
Got it. Nice, Sam. Yeah, me too. I mean, that's a great way to try it. Imagine being able to rent it for like, a flight when it would count, or if Apple rented them for a week or something. I think I would do that. I'd pay a couple $100 to rent it for a week just to see if it's really something that'd be compelling, especially if they would put that $200, let's say, toward the price of buying the thing. If I do decide to buy it, it's like a rent to own kind of deal. So,
well, that's what they had to drive, right? When they finally got some traction with the Mac, in order to get the traction, they had people take it home and test drive it.
Yeah, exactly.
I wonder if
kind of have to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of the first Mac, Guillaume says that the first Mac would have cost 10 grand these days. So that's another great point, that, this stuff does come down in price. And so at first it's a really pro market and it's a, high-end thing. And then of course it comes to the mainstream, and Apple's always been great with that as far as like what they call affordable luxury. It's like the iPhone is an affordable luxury. I could use a flip phone. I could use an Android, but it's a premium to have this beautiful thing that I can carry around every day. So
I don't know how beautiful it is. I mean, it looks pretty,
especially in a case.
Pretty. Oh, the case is nice.
Caseless,
the case is worth the money right there.
Oh, you're talking about the Vision Pro? Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
The iPhone is
Wasn't
a nice looking thing, but.
Oh, sure.
Well, yeah.
I got one of those.
Yeah, those are exactly. Well, we can complain about those too, but. So I had a couple little. Well, I don't know. What do you have for our listeners here, Sam and Jerry?
Well, I had a quick question, actually, just semi-related to this. Not really, but I was just having a meeting today. I'm just wondering, how often, if you guys have a Zoom or Teams or whatever meeting, how often are you guys dressing up for that meeting, or are you at all?
I rarely have video calls. I find that it's a lot easier for my brain to function as I'm walking around. So like I'll be in front of my screen. I'll be like troubleshooting with the client, and talking to them on the phone, obviously, like we all do. And, we get into more of a narrative thing, and I stand up and I'm walking around. I'm explaining something to them. They're asking me questions. I'm answering. So I like the flexibility of just moving around. I don't know. It's just the way I work. And if I have to stay fixated on the screen and like feel like I'm on display to the client, like I find that uncomfortable and it is less effective for me. So I avoid video calls if at all possible. I do have a couple recurring ones with certain clients, but
Yeah.
I do plan for those. I don't go too crazy, but yeah.
I would wear a shirt with a collar.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's just like old conversation because when Zoom all started to kick off with COVID, I was just thinking about it today because I don't try as hard anymore, even with like, clients that are more formal.
I could tell.
Yeah. See, I mean, thanks. Nice zinger, Jerry. Yeah. So like even today, yeah, I had a bi-weekly call with a client. I'm like, who cares? I'm like, I still do my job well. I'm like, who freaking cares if I'm wearing a collared shirt or not? So
yeah,
I just don't care as much anymore. So I was just curious as we were feeding off of the Vision Pro conversation where you have like an avatar in that case, where how you present yourself these days. And if that's really changed over the last couple of years since COVID.
Yeah, it's a good question.
That's a good point.
I'm thinking way back, 20 years ago, I would order we've talked about on the show, I'd order the polo shirts or the button downs from the ACN. They would do custom orders like that, or I'd order my own. And it was good branding, and it was, it's good to look professional. You're going to people's, offices and things like that. So you certainly don't want to be the worst dressed one in the office, if you're going to show up at a client. And it's kind of the same, same idea. Like Jerry says, wear a collared shirt, something that just presents, that's something that people can see. It's like when they're looking at basically your neck up. So it presents like I care about you as the client. I care about this call. I planned ahead. I'm not just showing up in whatever I was wearing, it's so, yeah.
Yeah. Real quick side note. I did severely overdress one time in person. I went to like this big behemoth company where we were supporting like a little department, which we've done in the past. And that we dress in like suits and like, ties, 3-piece suits and everything like that. And we went to the boardroom or to the conference room and everyone came in pretty casual, like, guys, like, what is this? Like, they're like basically making fun of us, like the way we were dressed. They're like, you got to chill out. Like, it's just a normal meeting. But that's when I realized that you could also overdo it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. You don't want to be the worst dressed. You also don't want to be the best dressed in the office because it look a little ridiculous to have like a suit,
I do have something technical to feed off this though. Sorry, but I was just thinking about this too. Have any of you guys ever set up Zoom rooms? Like a Zoom room, like that function of Zoom called Zoom rooms?
I've heard of it, but I don't. Tell us about it. What do you do with that?
Yeah, so like I just did a couple. I've worked with them, but I've never set them up until recently. Mm-hmm. So I was curious about it because, a client was asking me, well, what is this functionality? What does it do? And I'm like, shoot, I really don't know much about it right now. But we helped them source out some Logitech equipment, for the camera piece and the microphone and all that stuff. And I'll probably go into that story another time in depth, but I learned a lot of amazing things about it and also some difficulties. Basically, the Zoom room acts as basically your calendar reservation for that conference room. So you could use a Logitech device or even an iPad, but the Zoom Room app would be locked into there. And as long as you set it up on the back end with like, let's say 365 or Google. And with 365, there's PowerShell stuff, which I really am not good at. But anyway, as long as you set it up, then you have a resource in there and you can literally create an event and say, I'm booking this conference room with this Zoom meeting. And it creates the meeting, puts it on that conference room display and is booked for the room. And it's really, I used to see this just in like fancy buildings, but it's really a great way of having a small company can set this up and have real cool functionality through the conferencing. And then on top of it, you come in, you have your room reserved, you start the meeting from the tap pad. It goes on the television with the camera and microphone that you purchased. And then in addition, you can do wirelessly screen sharing. So like if you're in proximity of the device and you're come in with a Mac, you can just join and hit screen share and you don't have to plug into HDMI or anything like that. And it just shows up in the meeting. And I thought this was great and something I'd never done before, at least in terms of setup. And I was just curious if you guys had or if anyone out there had before as well.
My misunderstanding of what it was, and maybe it is indeed what I'm going to say, is I thought it was just like a virtual static link that was always open or always it was permanent. It was as permanent as a virtual room could be. And that at any point people could jump in onto that and have a conversation.
I suppose you could do like an ongoing meeting, but this was more structured to be like bookings for certain people, and you had to reserve the room and the resources within it. But yeah, I mean, one of my clients just built out an office space with 2 conference rooms, and they wanted the Zoom rooms, and that's where we had to scramble to learn really fast and understand how to get it out, which I'm sure we've all done. But in the end, I actually tried not to sound too surprised because I was helping her remotely doing the final touches. And she's like, "Oh, great, it works." I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome." Like, I was truly surprised. I was like, "I got it." Like, it worked. But I was trying to hide my surprise because I was like, "I know what I'm doing," But it turned out to be really fascinating. I kind of like it. It's just a little bit expensive for the hardware side if you got to, shell out for the fancy camera and mic and all that.
The camera, the mic, the screen. I mean, unless you already have that stuff in your conference room, but yeah, then it's probably got to be compatible, right? Yeah, that's interesting. Cool. Thanks for bringing that to our attention too, because like I've heard the term, and it's like I'd have to scramble even just to be able to talk coherently about it with a client. If they were like asking me about it, I'd be Googling. So that's it's a good little tutorial. That's fantastic. Well, speaking of some video stuff, I have a quick tip here, and this came up when we were doing our first broadcast. Speaking of scrambling to bring it all together, when was that, last week? So the feature continuity camera. Jerry's mentioned it a few times recently. It's the way I'm using the camera now. I wish it was better with eye contact. As I look down to look at you guys, I'm not looking at my camera, so that's kind of like an age-old problem since Zoom. So I wanted to use my continuity camera with my spare iPhone, and it works really well in any Apple app, like FaceTime app, all that stuff. It just you test it works fine. It wasn't appearing in Chrome, and in Chrome you're supposed to just be able to go into Chrome settings and select that camera, right? So I tried doing that, it just wouldn't appear. So I found a tip in case this helps anybody. That it's actually a privacy feature. It's a feature, not a bug. So the issue is that if you are using a third-party app, and you want to avoid the user selecting the wrong camera, or maybe a website, just taking over somebody's video or something like that, and seeing what's on their camera, even though they don't expect that that's happening. Apparently browser-based video apps will only see the phone when it is in the quote magic pose. And this was referenced by, I think, a feedback that someone had submitted, or a bug report essentially, which was replied by Apple. So I think this is the Apple term, but I've never seen it anywhere else. But it's called the magic pose. So it has to be in landscape orientation with the screen off, locked, and motionless. So not handheld. You can't just be holding your phone and testing Chrome or whatever. You actually have to basically set it up and leave it in landscape mode locked. And have the camera be unobstructed, apparently. So those are the kind of magic incantations to do when they talk about swinging the dead cat or whatever. It's actually you need to hold the phone steady in landscape, mount it, have the camera view be clear, and have it be locked. And then with all that magic done, it will actually appear in in Chrome in the settings, for example, and other browser-based apps. And apparently it also will allow it to it triggers the automatic camera selection. So even if you do have Apple apps like FaceTime or Photo Booth, for example, when they I guess the app decides to use your continuity camera by default, if it's in that pose essentially. So if it's on your desk and it's obviously not a good view of you, then it's not going to use that. But if it's in this magic pose, it will actually use that camera primarily. So the magic pose of the phone, keep that in mind in case it happens to you and a client. Yeah.
That's great. We got our show title now. The magic pose.
Magic pose. It pairs well with the Vision Pro porn discussion from earlier. I don't know what's the.
I mean, that's really funny, Joe. I've never heard those two words paired together like that.
Right.
To refer to Apple technology. Sam, you're Mr. Apple.
You're Mr. Apple. Yeah, you've never.
Once a show, it comes out.
Right. Yeah.
No, I'm gonna look it up though.
Yeah, I don't know if it's an Apple official, because again, I looked for this and I think I found this solution on Reddit, linking to some other guy's blog, where they had submitted feedback to Apple and got the response. So it's I don't think there's even a KB article from Apple saying, by the way, magic pose, make sure the iPhone is set up correctly. It's just interesting.
No. It does describe it in the KB, but when I typed in magic pose continuity camera, the Reddit article showed up. So
oh, there you go. Okay.
Interesting.
There's probably one guy from Apple who or gal, who wasn't supposed to use that term. It's not an official term, but now it's becoming that for us at least. So
Right.
yeah.
So I have a talking point that I'd like to bring up, but I'm willing to share something very embarrassing that I should have known this. I should have known this 2024. I had a client and I'm sitting with him and he's saying, how come I'm getting some texting that's showing up on the phone and it's not showing up on my Mac in messages? And you guys know this, and everybody listening knows this. And it's me that is just like asleep at the wheel. Maybe this is why I didn't pass the test the first time.
Wait, 2 questions though. Was it green or blue?
Well, it wasn't showing up, so it could have been pink.
That's right. If a text doesn't show up, does it have a
right.
color? No, I guess not.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm like, I went into the preferences and messages, and you guys already know where I'm heading, or at least Joe does. So I'll cut right to the chase. Yeah. And I said to the client, well, it could be a carrier setting, but let me get back to you on this. This is what we always say. This is the resolution. Is you never say, you can say, I don't know. It's great when you do that. Well, it's not great, but it's better than trying to act like you know and you don't know. And then you just keep on flailing, for the next 15 minutes on his time or her time. So I told him I would get back to him. So again, I thought it was a backbone carrier issue, right? Because I was texting him and he was getting on the phone, but he wasn't getting it on the Mac. And so I was using Ring Central, which is my VoIP provider for my business. And I'm thinking there's some backbone relationship that's not happening, whatever. And the solution was you go into settings, who knew, right? You go into messages and you scroll down till you see text message forwarding. Now, this sounds elementary, right? Yeah, of course, but it's on the phone that you needed to do this, and you needed to enable it for the devices that are associated with the iCloud account, right?
Yeah. It's an interesting one because, of course, this predates messages in iCloud, and you would sort of think, or I would think, that if you have messages in iCloud enabled on both devices, like, why do you also need text message forwarding? Shouldn't it just kind of send those on some kind of side channel thing as part of iMessage or something, through iCloud and just sync?
Well, that's
any message.
Yeah. Right. Text messaging is SMS, and that's I
guess that's the reason. Yeah, to your point. Yeah. But to me, it's like, why wouldn't it just sync everything, whether it's blue or green, through iMessage? But I get it, And the other one there is we used to always have to walk clients through the getting into the send and receive, options there, right? And they would always say, oh, send read receipts. And I'm like, no, go back up. It's send and receive. It's like a hard one to kind of walk people through. And I had this come up recently where they weren't, let's see, what was the issue? On the Mac, they weren't getting any messages, and their phone number wasn't an option. They were signed into iMessage, but they weren't getting any of the messages, and they had messages in iCloud enabled. They weren't getting green or blue messages on their Mac. So I had them go in here and look for send and receive, and they were saying, I forget if it's not there. I think it's there, but you have to say use your Apple ID for iMessage, or maybe it's not there until you select that. But that was the issue, is that they at some point had gotten signed out of, they're using their Apple ID for iMessage, and they had to, of course, say yes to that. Then they had all the options. But it is, I've gotten tripped up by that text message forwarding one also for the same point you mentioned, where it's like, why is that a setting that you have to enable on the phone? Like, just because I get a new Mac, shouldn't it offer to enable that on the Mac, for example, because I'm not going to remember, and a client certainly isn't going to think of going into the messages settings on the phone, but I don't think that there's any other way for that to work other than going in there and actually just manually enabling that, right?
Yeah, physically enabling it. Yeah. Anyway, I got caught out by that. And interestingly, and I can't forget, I reached out to you, Joe, because you and I had recorded a Command Control Power show, and Sam was on the road tonight phoning in from some hotel, except that he wasn't phoning in from some hotel that particular night. And I was looking for a fix, and not in the literal sense, like a junkie would be looking for a fix, but I was looking for the solution that I had originally come up with and discussed with you on the show for Adobe Acrobat. And there's all these narratives and all these threads, if you Google this, where sometimes Acrobat will open up mostly on an Intel Mac and show a white box and won't go away. And sometimes it'll be when you quit the app, the white box will show up. And there's all these different incantations. And so I was looking for the solution that I provided on the show, and I couldn't find it. And then I had to go back and find the show and got the solution. And that actually wasn't the solution, but it was one of the things I needed to try. But here's my talking point for tonight. I use Hoodoo, which is a repository for client passwords. So you can set up separate instances for your clients, and you can track anything you basically want. It's kind of like an open book, and you have to do a little bit of manual work setting it up for the things that you want to track. But a client can have access to this. They can have for free. They can have read access. You pay a monthly fee to Hoodoo, and you can either host it yourself, or you could have Hoodoo offer a cloud hosting. And it came up in the discussion most recently on the Hoodoo channel on Slack. And I just blanked out on the gentleman's name. And this can't be an edit point anymore. So, I know. And Matt Wostoff, who was actually on the show years and years ago, who manages a very, very large IT company. And we were talking about the discussion of liability and what would happen if somehow the Hoodoo hosted instance was compromised and the passwords were leaked. And so there was an ongoing discussion about the justification to self-host it, because if you self-host it, then you're responsible for it, and the buck stops with you versus relying on this company that's offering you this service. And my contention was, for a company of my size, which is basically single member LLC that I am, and I would imagine this might apply in both of your cases, that if you were using Hoodoo, it would almost make more sense from a liability standpoint and to have Hoodoo host it. And if there was some sort of a data breach and your client's data was exposed and your client legally came after you, that the liability would subrogate to the company that you contracted with to host the data that was promising you that the data would be secure. Whereas if you were self-hosting, let's say on a Synology, using spinning up a
Docker container or whatever.
Docker container, thank you. And let's say Synology had some sort of a bug in their code and people could penetrate onto your network through some backdoor, or somebody came in and just took your Synology from your network rack.
Yeah, that's your responsibility, right? To your point,
right.
versus
100%, 100%. So it's going to, either way, it potentially could put you out of business, but I think self-hosting, there's a real liability there.
Yeah. That's much more dangerous, I would think, especially for a small business. But do you have any legal paperwork that says that we're not responsible for third-party software or anything like that? Because I put that in my contracts to make sure that there's no question that it's not me.
No, I do carry insurance for accidental loss of records.
That's good.
Basic insurance, nothing super fancy that I pay a lot of money for. So, and I think that's like $1,000, $1,200 a year. So it's not like that guy got some super duper.
Jerry, can you tell me if do we have a firewall?
What is a firewall?
It's like everybody who signs up for insurance, it's like I know they're signing up for cyber insurance.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they just like, that's the question. They're just like always asking that. Do we have a firewall? I'm like, I don't know. I don't manage your network. I don't know what's going. Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny.
Great.
I've gotten
Yeah.
those same exact questions. I'm like, just give me the paperwork. Just
Yeah,
give it to me.
exactly. Just please copy and paste, because like this interpretation you're making of whatever
Yeah.
they asked you by phone that like is a
Right.
game of telephone is like not going to work for me.
That's funny.
Yeah, no,
But the
I mean,
insurance,
yeah,
yeah, I was just
go
going to say
ahead.
the insurance business is based on risk and what is your
Right.
risk level. But I just think it's also based on exposure too, right? So
Yeah.
if you fly all the time, your exposure to die in an aircraft accident is much higher than, someone who only flies a couple times a year. So
Yeah.
I think
Great.
it depends on your risk level. I just, the more I thought about it, the more I thought like, geez, this is the right choice for me, but it's different from every business based on size.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and also like to your point about insurance, if you self-host, you can also just pay for insurance, where you are absolved of any liability if your Synology is stolen or hacked or whatever the case is. I still don't want that kind of feeling of liability or like responsibility, to my clients, like that, I screwed up or so, I mean, probably it's not because I screwed up. It's just because of the nature of like technology. Somebody hacked into something I wasn't responsible for, but I was maintaining or whatever. In theory, like I could be absolved of the legal risk of that or the financial risk, but I just still prefer to outsource that stuff. But you make a really good point for like why that is, that, it's sort of like it's on them. If anything goes wrong, it's also on them to manage it, to maintain it. The responsibility is there. I was just making this case to a client recently about just the concept of a server anymore, where they were saying, our company's growing. We need a place to organize like information about our properties, photos, contracts, things like that. And, he was saying, what's the best place for that? And so we were talking about, cloud storage basically. And then he asked about, is this the concept where we're like, we need something like in our basement? Like we need like some kind of server in the basement, what's this? Sorry, I missed that.
Cloud.
The cloud, right? Thank you. Right, pointing up. Yeah. So he was pointing down. He's like, do I need something in the basement? I was like pointing down. And I'm like, well, no, like so like that's pretty old school to think, to even like wonder about that, especially now. And mainly for this reason, I was explaining like, that means then you need to basically contract us to manage and maintain that thing in the basement, whatever it is. We can't be sure that like, your internet's not going to go out. So like maybe your internet goes out, you can't get to it remotely now. Maybe the power's out, whatever. Plus like you're only, you have to connect to the server and then access the stuff that's on the server versus cloud syncing services. And of course there's ways of doing this with Synology and whatever Drive, cloud, whatever sync, whatever. But like Dropbox just syncing to every computer or OneDrive or whatever, whatever platform you go with, has a lot of advantage where you're working on a plane. You've got your Vision Pro on your face. You've got your Dropbox in front of you, and like you've got your data. So like, why would you want to take on the responsibility of managing hardware, replacing the hardware every few years, upgrading, updating the hardware, all that stuff, all the burden of that, plus the liability, and like versus just contracting Dropbox monthly to just run all that for you. It's just clearly, I'm a believer in the cloud at this point. I mean, I was one of the last people. I was very resistant to it, but yes, that's another great reason to go with, with a company that specializes in this. Then again, with Hoodoo, for example, I couldn't get the answer. I didn't ask them directly, but from their site, I wasn't sure if it's encrypted at rest. So somebody very well could, in theory, break into Hoodoo on the kind of infrastructure level, and maybe they could access your client's data because I don't know, again, if it's encrypted at rest on those machines, whereas if you self-host something, it you can possibly make it more secure, at least on that level.
Yeah, in the discussion, Matt mentioned that Hoodoo is using for their servers a very well-known cloud hosting company. So, but that still does not answer the question if it's encrypted at risk.
It's good. It would be a good thing to check. Guillaume in the chat also mentions, speaking of insurance, you can get the insurance today in theory, and you can ask to fill out that, kind of paperwork, that questionnaire later. So just something to consider. I don't know if that's the case in every case, where your clients trying to sign up for insurance, because I imagine the price changes. I imagine the coverage,
Yeah.
you know, you might lose the coverage entirely if like the questionnaire comes back where, you know, you didn't have any of the things that you thought you had or whatever. So,
Right.
could
And
be
then
a
the
concern.
discussion, I think, was on Slack in terms of filling out those insurance questionnaires, that there were people, and again, this was a separate conversation that happened a month ago or something like that, where people didn't want to take on that liability of saying, yes, we have this. And well, who filled the form out? Well, your IT guy. Well,
Yeah.
you know, your IT guy was
Yeah.
wrong. And that
Yep.
potentially could be a problem too.
Yeah, I like to do that stuff verbally. I think to your point there, like, you
Check this
know,
box.
let's go through the form together. Like, you're going to fill it out because that's, you know, and you can even tell them it's like a liability thing. You know, you don't want to take on more liability by you filling out the form. I think that most clients would understand that, and that, you know, they would be filling it out under your guidance, but at least you're like one step removed from that. I think that,
Yeah, that's not my handwriting.
yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had go ahead.
No, I'm good.
Well, I had an interesting issue that I thought was another interesting one for the show. This was supporting my dad with tech support. So I get this.
These are always good.
I know. I've been getting more of these lately too. I mean, it was a well-formed request from my dad. You know, he said he called me and basically said, "Hey, I lost my first home screen. It's empty. You know, my first home screen is empty." And I said, what do you mean? And he's like, well, it's on my iPhone. You know, it's just like has my background. I said, you see anything? What do you mean empty? Is it like a black screen? He's like, well, it looks kind of like my background. And then I just see edit at the top. And I'm like, oh boy, like this is a mystery, you know, I don't know where this is going.
Tell them to put in a ticket.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, all right, now I got to see this. I don't know what's going on here. So I'm talking him through some different stuff. I'm like, all right, try rebooting it. He's like, I did. And I wonder sometimes when you tell people to restart, do they just like turn it off, you know, like sleep the screen, you know, and then like wake the screen? Like, all right, did you see the Apple logo? Yeah, I saw the Apple, the whole thing. Okay, so you did reboot. Okay. And then, you know, and then Jerry, your guess, and I thought this came to my mind too. Is he looking at a screenshot of something? Like, what did he set a screenshot to the background? I don't know. I'm just
somebody's
grasping,
punking
you know?
your dad on his phone.
Yeah, totally, exactly. I'm just like,
Yeah.
who did this? How did this happen? And so I said, all right, plug it into the Mac. You know, I'm like, oh God, I hope they have a cable for his phone over there. You know, so he plugs it into the Mac. I open up QuickTime Player. And I see that he's not looking at a home screen. He's looking at the Today view. So the Today view is to the left of your home screen, of your main home screen, right? And the issue was that he wasn't seeing his stuff when he turned on his phone. He wasn't seeing his first home screen. He was disoriented. He was looking at, I guess, his second home screen. So he was swiping, you know, to go left to try to see the one that's to the left of the second one, which would be the first one. And instead he's seeing the Today view rather than seeing his first home screen. So this is the confusing thing about trying to sort out what a client is describing you. You know, he's telling me his first home screen is blank, but actually his first home screen wasn't even there. He's swiping left or swiping like to the right or whatever, and he's seeing the Today view, which didn't have any widgets or anything in it, and he's just seeing edit at the top because it was empty.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so that makes sense, but where is your home screen? I'm also like, how do you get somebody's home screen back? Like, how do you restore that from backup? What do I have to reset? You know, do I have to erase his phone and restore from like yesterday's backup and hope for the best? You know, that seems pretty heavy-handed to like, you know, fix this. And I'm like, I wish I could remember, like, what did you have on the home screen? He's like, oh, I had, you know, messages and mail,
The Google.
and photo. I'm just like, yeah. So I'm like, well, I know the main one, but, like,
Foxfire.
you know, and then it's going to be a series of questions like for the next week, like, where's my this icon? Where's my that icon?
Right.
So I'm like, I need to figure out a solution here. So
Can I ask one quick question here before you?
Yeah.
So if you were able to connect with him using the Splashtop app for the iPhone, could you have?
I could have, but I was using QuickTime Player on the Mac, so I was able to see his screen. Same deal, but also I think it's a little better sometimes because don't those time out, like Splashtop times out after a couple minutes or something, and you have to go back to the app to no? Okay. I've had that. I don't know why I've seen that in some cases.
They can accidentally hit the stop broadcasting button. inadvertently.
Oh, maybe that was it. And they had to go back into it. Yeah, I don't use it as much as I should, but QuickTime was working well. And again, like just seeing it, I was like, oh, that's the today view. That's not, because you can see, you can see the dots on the bottom. Like when you're looking at the, the home screen, you can see like which kind of dot you're on. So I'm seeing that he's actually on the new first home screen essentially. And therefore, like when he swipes, he's looking at the today view. So that was a big clue. So then I realized he lost his first home screen. So I'm literally Googling like iPhone home screen missing, because I'm just like, I don't know, what is this, a feature? Like, what is this? And sure enough, I found an Apple discussion page, and I'm sure there are many, referring to this feature of iOS 14 and later. You can hide your home screens. Cool. Like, great. So you can hide your home screens, and you can then therefore show your home screens. So the solution was, and I'm walking my dad through this. So you touch and hold an empty area of your home screen. You tap the dots near the bottom of your screen. So you can do this. So go to you might uncover some lost home screens here, Jerry. So you can like go into edit mode of your home screen, basically of your what do they call it, the springboard, and then
sorry,
tap
I want
the
to step
dots.
ahead. I want to step ahead, just like our typical clients. Yeah,
exactly. And all right, so you can see the screen I'm talking about, right? It's got all your home screens, and and then you can choose which ones to hide and show. So
well, you can also minus one out completely. So all those icons. Oh man.
Yeah. And that's why I was like, he's like, I don't see, I was telling him, okay, like tap the circle to like turn it on, to put a check there. And he goes, I don't see a check. I'm like, I see a minus. I'm like, no, don't hit that. No. Like, that's all I need, is like, I just deleted my entire home screen. So yeah, that was a fun one. So that's a feature, and it's good to know about in case your clients call you with a big mystery like that.
That's fun.
Wow.
Yeah. Interesting one.
It's a good one.
You guys got anything like that?
Oh no, my only story. My dad, he does sometimes call me for tech support, but my only recent story about my dad is his addiction to Facebook Marketplace. And in that addiction to Facebook Marketplace, he lives an hour and a half from me. He's always finding stuff that's near my house. And then he's like, hey, can you go to New Canaan and pick up this thing outside this person's front door? I'm like, no, I cannot do that.
You can tell them to pick one or the other. Do you want tech support or like, courier service? Because I'm going to
I love him though. He's always finding some cool stuff out there. It's kind of interesting. It's like his retirement hobby. He loves finding deals on Facebook Marketplace.
And what's mostly is he looking for?
It's a lot of like anything that looks like an amazing deal. So if he sees like an Apple Watch, he's like, I got it for like $30, but it says enter your iCloud. I'm like, oh no, Dad, you just bought it's activation locked. You're screwed now. But it was only $30. I'm like, that's why. So,
they had 50 of them there. I could have bought any one I wanted.
And will he flip this stuff typically, or he's just excited to get it?
I think usually he just is excited to get it, or he'll give it to somebody because he knows they need something. And so he does that a lot. I think he gets joy out of that. Actually, he likes finding something that was a good deal, but also that someone needs. So like he just got like a coffee pot for my aunt because hers broke, and he's like, he found an amazing deal on a really nice coffee pot. So she's happy, he's happy. I'm like, well, whatever suits your fancy, right? As long as I don't have to pick it up, I'm good.
Definitely. All right, I got one more to wrap us up here. This is just a cry for help. I need an answer on this one. So maybe there'll be a solution by the time we get there. But so you guys, do you use lock screen messages like when you manage a computer? You have a client policy, and maybe you want to say like property of ABC company or something like that. Have you guys used that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can push that out as a configuration profile to manage the lock screen, and you can do other things too, like set the screensaver. Choose a desktop background, things like that. But basically what I do is I just choose a message, a lock screen message, so that, clients, when they reboot, they'll see that message. So I had this freelancer client who was working for, freelancer working for a client of mine, and had their personal Mac enrolled at the time. They were like an intern or just doing freelance or something like that. And they needed access to certain company resources. So we enrolled them in the company policy, including, again, this lock screen message. So it basically said on her personal computer, property of, the company name, call my company for support, basically. And that's fine when she was working there. And then when she left, we unenrolled her Mac, and we thought all was well. And then she follows up months later and says, "I'm still seeing my computer is owned by this company, blah blah blah. And like, can you remove that?" And I said, or basically she was concerned it was still being managed. So I said, "Well, let me double check. No, it's it's sure enough, it's unenrolled from management, so it's not being managed in any way." That's just a lock screen message, which we've seen sometimes doesn't go away for some reason. So I said, you can go into, of course, system settings, lock screen, and then you can choose the message, show, I think it says like show message on lock screen or something. And you can set that message or turn that feature off right there on the lock screen settings. So I gave her those instructions, and I, set her mind at ease, like it's not being managed in any other way, but you can just delete it there. It's just kind of a remnant of the management. So she tries that and follows up again. Again, months go by, and then she follows up and says, that never worked. I don't know what's going on. I even tried upgrading to Sonoma now, and still didn't go away. I went to Apple, and they said, oh, maybe you're still enrolled in MDM management. So then she's back to like being concerned that we're still managing this computer. So I got on the phone with her today, spent about an hour troubleshooting remotely. And this is not billable because I'm not going to charge my client for it. And I'm not going to charge the freelancer from the client. It's just kind of like, I'm going to try to do right by her basically. Yeah. And also learn something in the process. Right. So, okay, so I go in, I'm like, let me try my own instructions. I go to the lock screen settings, and sure enough, she had already deleted or whatever she did with the message. I think it was just a space or something. I tried turning it off. It doesn't show when you log out. It doesn't show when you're on the lock screen, but if you restart, it shows the old message. I tried turning on the lock screen message and setting it to just a space bar, just an empty space there. Tried setting it to like a message, test message kind of thing, right? And then, you can get that to display on the lock screen or when you log out of the user. But when you restart, it shows the old message. Where is it getting the old message from? I'm like, I think so. As soon as I first saw that, I thought, well, this has to be like a file vault thing. And I said, is it possibly a file vault enabled? Because this was like, every time we restart, I'm disconnected, blah, blah, blah. So I'm asking her to check some things. She says, no, I don't use that. Oh, what could it be? So, I'm testing different things. I reconnect, I go in and I check, and sure enough, she does have File Vault turned on. So that was exactly what the issue was. So we turned off File Vault, we restarted, it doesn't show the old message. We can change it to anything we want. It works. So of course I don't want to tell her, well, no problem, just turn off File Vault, because then someday in the future something happens and she says, well, my tech guy told me to turn off File Vault.
Well, what's the logic behind that? Why does File Vault defeat that?
Well, it's because the File Vault screen at login, like that login window is like a pre-boot thing, and it's like in firmware, or I guess it's part of the recovery partition. This also changed. Sam, Mr. Apple probably knows more about this.
Mr. Apple,
this also changed relatively recently. So Sam, what am I trying to get at here? Because it used to be an EFI firmware thing that was part of like the extensible firmware interface from Intel. Like that was the thing that would load the File Vault screen, and it would save that desktop and that banner and whatever like as a static thing, like your icons, all that stuff was like recreated in like low level firmware that was, like kind of like it was trying to look like the normal login window, but it wasn't, and my understanding is like now is it like using the actual like OS or something? Can you say more about that, Sam, at all?
It still is. I hate the way this is like Mr. Apple gets put on the spot for these things. His name is the worst. So, I mean, it still has a pre-boot volume. So I think maybe the disconnect from MDM probably, maybe it has to go through one reboot at some point while still connected to be able to see that message going away. But it does have its own separate pre-boot volume still. So
you might have to remove the lock screen message like first while it's still enrolled and reboot in theory, something like that.
I've seen that before. I don't know if this particular one, I don't know if this is the answer, but I have seen that before where sometimes I have to remove it from the scope of the policy or whatever it is before unenrolling it.
Oh, interesting.
And then it's gone. Oh, there my thumbs up went. And then it's gone once before the unenrollment occurs, and then it's, out of the loop. I've seen that rarely. I got to be honest. I haven't seen it a lot.
Yeah. I mean, of course, as I'm searching, I'm finding all kinds of references to this going back 10 plus years where, like if you used to be able to, I guess you still can manage lock screen message with a command line, command, basically a default write command, I think. But that would not update the File Vault like message, if you didn't use the OS to set the lock screen message, you had to also like reset a cache or something like that, or like touch a EFI firmware like thing or whatever to like tell the system that like, okay, that needs to be redone. The file vault thing needs to be redone. So there are references to this like going way back. But this client is up to date with 14.3 Sonoma on an Apple Silicon machine, so it has nothing to do with extensible firmware interface anymore. That's like an Intel thing, I believe.
Yeah.
And again, File Vault has changed, I think. So like it's using its own. It's kind of like has a version of Mac OS or something like you said. It's part of the recovery OS, right? So I guess it's part or pre-boot OS or whatever. So it's a different mechanism now. And anyway, this is just a weird thing. So we rebooted, we turned off, the message, rebooted, turned on the message, rebooted. We even at one point changed her desktop background, because I'm like, how does the desktop background get set on the File Vault login window versus like the main, OS level setting?
That's a good
maybe
point.
if I just like change that and then like, and then it'll just like fix it or update it, it'll update the whole thing. Oddly enough, what it did was it changed the background for File Vault correctly, but it put the same old message back up, like on top of the new background. So it's not like what in my head, it was like the static kind of image, that was like the text is embedded with the background. It actually was just like, it redid it. It like, I don't know. It's a really weird situation because there's like no way to change it. I created a configuration profile using iMazing Profile Editor and like specified a message. That message shows when you like log out, or go to the lock screen or whatever. But if you reboot, it's the old message again. So you can't even like I set it originally with the configuration profile, and I'm using a configuration profile now and it's not letting me reset it. So I'm totally baffled. If anybody has seen this, like, please let me know. There's more info in the Slack channel for Adigy, because that was the original way that we managed this. But yeah, if anybody out there has seen this and has a amazing idea, just let me know, please.
You could take the Apple Store Genius approach and just reinstall the OS.
That's probably how she upgraded. She probably, she ended up with an upgrade to Sonoma. That might have been their attempt at solving it, but it didn't.
Right, but not an upgrade, an
surprising.
actual, just a re-download or
Reinstall.
reinstall. I don't know.
Yeah, data doesn't matter. Just wipe it. And
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. And also it's like, how much effort do I want to go through? Like, backing up her data, wiping the drive, reinstalling, restoring, because it's also totally free. I'm not going to charge. I don't think I'll be able to charge anybody. So yeah, weird one. So somebody help, please.
And of course, the takeaway is never put messages on these computers again.
Yeah,
until
I
Apple,
guess.
Until Mr. Apple fixes it.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it was
messages,
property, if it was owned by the company, it wouldn't be an issue. It's like, it's because of the fact that like she's using her personal Mac to like get access to the company's stuff. So it has to be managed, even though it's just tricky.
New policy, BYOD, you don't put the message on there.
Yeah.
You make a separate.
Exactly. I could have made a separate policy. I could have just made a separate policy and then, excluded that from the policy, but live and learn. Well, for the patrons, we have an episode coming up where we're going to discuss a couple of interesting topics. So one is I wanted to do a little tutorial on Uptime Robot. So I posted about this and I set this up and it's been working. And I wanted to zoom out of that conversation and talk also about like how we charge clients for network monitoring, network maintenance. Like, so for a long time, I've been charging clients for network. What do we call it? Network maintenance and updates, right? So it's like we used to do the updates for clients and now we just use auto update pretty much across the board. Mm-hmm. So we don't we need a new service basically because there's not a lot of network maintenance and updates that's needed. We instead, I think what's needed is some level of monitoring. So we have a solution maybe for doing that. So it's something I would like to talk about on a Patreon show. And then also there was some chatter about how much can we do in Adigy to sort of replace some of the functionality of Watchman monitoring. And I think that'd be an interesting topic to kick around as well. And then lastly, the other topic that I want to discuss is something that Guillaume just brought up in the chat earlier. I received an email from Apple about the test that I took back in, November, I think it was. And I'm like, why am I getting this email? You know, and it was, or maybe it was from Pearson or something like that. So it's like,
Pearson.
oh, your score results are available. I'm like,
Right.
I already
got
have my score results.
Yeah, I got those today too.
Yeah. So, and then
I think I took the test 20 times, so I got like 20 emails.
You got 20 emails.
Yeah, like April, here's May, here's June. Yeah.
Right. So for me, I got the results and I'm like, I don't, like I took the test, I passed. I'm looking at the date. Okay, this was from, November. I'm glad I didn't like forget that I had scheduled an extra test or whatever. I don't know what the email is. And I hadn't clicked any links yet. So Guillaume explained it actually in the chat, and it's kind of an interesting thing. I think Apple, they recently changed the requirements for the test, and I think like rescored some of the exams. So without sharing the specific text here, maybe we can talk more on the behind the scenes Patreon episodes about, just kind of a retrospective or debriefing about the testing saga that we all went
through. So you're
through.
saying I passed all 20 times then?
Yeah, exactly. Well, Jerry, maybe I'll save this next thing that Guillaume mentioned for the Patreon show. But yeah, you may be in for a little bit of a treat. Speaking of passing
Great.
20 times. So
probably would get money back then. What do you think, Mr. Apple?
I hope so.
You'll get a voucher probably.
You can take it 20 more times for free, Jerry. Good news.
And then you have half the price of a Vision Pro at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for joining us on this live recording and for listening to Command Control Power. Check us out at commandcontrolpower.com, and also click on support if you want to participate in the live show recordings and all the other special features and behind the scenes episodes that we record. Maybe even Jerry will go through his record collection at some point for you there.
Pull one out of the sleeve right now, Jerry.
Peace out, guys.